There is a kind of glow that no product can create, no mirror can fully reflect, and no praise from the world can sustain. It is not painted on the face, it is born from within. It is quiet yet powerful, gentle yet undeniable. When a woman carries this light, people feel it before they even understand it. And this glow is not a mystery, it is the result of how she lives, how she thinks, and how she honors her inner world. A woman begins to glow the moment she learns to sit with herself in stillness. In a world that constantly demands her attention, her energy, and her reaction, she chooses, even if only for a few moments each day, to return to silence. In that silence, she meets herself, not the version shaped by expectations, but the truth beneath all roles. And from that truth comes peace. Not a fragile peace that breaks under pressure, but a steady, rooted calm. When the mind is no longer chaotic, the face softens, the eyes become clear, and the presence becomes magnetic. Stillness is not emptiness. It is where her light begins to gather. And as she grows in awareness, she understands the importance of self-respect. She no longer says yes when her soul whispers no. She no longer sacrifices her dignity to please others or to avoid discomfort. She begins to draw boundaries, not walls to keep love out, but doors that protect what is sacred within her. This is not selfishness, it is alignment. A woman who respects herself teaches the world how to treat her. And there is a quiet glow that emerges when she no longer betrays her own worth for temporary approval. She also begins to care for her body, not from a place of insecurity, but from reverence. She understands that her body is not an object for judgment, but a vessel that carries her through life. She nourishes it with intention, moves it with gratitude, and listens to its needs with compassion. When she stops punishing her body and starts honoring it, something shifts. Her energy rises, her posture changes. Her energy rises, her posture changes. Her presence expands. This is not about appearance. It is about connection, and that connection radiates outward in a way that others can feel. But perhaps one of the most transformative habits is the way she chooses her thoughts. She becomes aware that her mind can either be a prison or a sanctuary. And so she becomes careful. She no longer entertains thoughts that constantly criticize, compare, or diminish her. Instead, she plants seeds of truth, patience, and belief. She understands that what she repeatedly tells herself becomes the foundation of her reality. When her inner voice becomes kind, encouraging, and steady, her outer world begins to reflect that harmony. A woman who speaks gently to herself carries a softness that no hardship can erase. She also begins to live with purpose, not a grand, distant purpose that feels overwhelming, but a daily intention to be real, to speak truthfully, to act with integrity, to align her actions with her values. She stops trying to fit into molds that were never made for her. She stops shrinking to be accepted, and instead she chooses authenticity, even when it feels uncomfortable. There is a unique glow in a woman who is not pretending. It is the glow of freedom, the glow of truth, the glow of someone who has nothing to prove and nothing to hide. And finally, she learns the balance of giving love without losing herself. She gives because it is her nature. She cares because her heart is open, but she no longer abandons herself in the process. She understands that true love does not require self-neglect. It does not ask her to become less so that others can feel more. Instead, she gives from fullness, not from emptiness. And when she does this, her love becomes pure, her presence becomes nourishing, and her energy becomes uplifting. People are drawn to her not because she tries to impress them, but because she reminds them of something they have forgotten within themselves. This glow, it is not created overnight, it is cultivated. It is the result of small, consistent choices. How she speaks to herself, how she treats her body, how she protects her peace, how she honors her truth. And the beautiful thing is, it is available to every woman, not by becoming someone else, but by returning to who she truly is. So if you seek to glow, do not look outside. Do not chase validation, perfection, or comparison. Sit with yourself, respect yourself, care for yourself, speak kindly to yourself, live truthfully, love wisely. And slowly, gently, you will notice the glow was never something you had to find. It was something you simply had to uncover. There is a quiet power that begins to awaken within a woman the moment she learns to be still. Not the kind of stillness that comes from exhaustion or withdrawal, but a conscious, intentional return to herself. In a world that constantly pulls her in 1,000 directions, through expectations, responsibilities, and the endless noise of comparison, she chooses, even briefly, to pause. And in that pause, something sacred begins to unfold. At first, it may feel unfamiliar. The silence can seem uncomfortable, even unsettling, because she has spent so long filling every empty space with distractions. But if she remains, if she resists the urge to escape, she will begin to notice something extraordinary. Beneath the noise of her thoughts, beneath the layers of worry and doubt, there is a deeper presence, calm, steady, and untouched by the chaos around her. This is where her true self resides. Self awareness is not about judging what she finds within, it is about observing with honesty and compassion. She begins to notice her patterns, the thoughts she repeats, the emotions she suppresses, the ways she reacts when she feels challenged or unseen, and instead of running from these realizations, she sits with them. She listens. Because every reaction carries a message, and every emotion reveals something that is asking to be understood. Through this practice, she starts to separate herself from the constant stream of thoughts in her mind. She realizes that she is not her fears, not her insecurities, not the voice that tells her she is not enough. She is the awareness behind those thoughts, the one who can witness them without being controlled by them. And this realization alone is transformative. It gives her space, it gives her choice, it gives her choice, it gives her freedom. As she continues to cultivate stillness, her inner world begins to shift. What once felt overwhelming starts to feel manageable. What once triggered immediate reactions now invites thoughtful responses. She becomes less reactive and more intentional. And this change is subtle but powerful. It is reflected in the way she speaks, the way she carries herself, and the way she interacts with others. Her energy softens, but it does not weaken. In fact, it becomes stronger because it is no longer scattered. When her mind is not constantly racing, her presence becomes grounded. When her emotions are not constantly overflowing, her heart becomes clear. And when she is no longer at war with herself, she begins to radiate a quiet confidence that does not need validation. Stillness also reconnects her to intuition, that inner voice that is often drowned out by fear and external opinions. The more she listens, the clearer it becomes. It guides her, gently but firmly, to what aligns with her truth, and as she learns to trust this guidance, she becomes less dependent on approval from the outside world. She no longer needs constant reassurance because she has built a relationship with herself that is rooted in trust. This is where her glow begins, not from something added, but from something revealed. When there is peace within, it naturally expresses itself outwardly. Her eyes reflect clarity. Her presence feels calming. Her words carry intention. People may not be able to explain it, but they feel it. They feel the steadiness, the warmth, the quiet strength that comes from a woman who knows herself. And the most beautiful part of this practice is that it does not require perfection. She does not need hours of meditation or a life free of challenges. All it asks is willingness, a willingness to pause, to listen, and to return to herself again and again. Even in the midst of a busy day, even in moments of stress, she can take a breath and reconnect. Each time she does, she strengthens that inner space where peace resides. Over time, this becomes her foundation. No matter what happens around her, she has a place within her that remains untouched. And from that place, she lives, she chooses, and she shines. There comes a moment in a woman's life when she realizes that constantly giving at the expense of herself is not kindness, it is quiet self-abandonment. For a long time, she may have believed that being good meant always agreeing, always accommodating, always putting others first. She may have mistaken silence for peace and sacrifice for love. But deep within, there is a gentle voice that begins to question this pattern. And when she finally listens, everything begins to change. Self-respect is not loud or aggressive. It does not seek to dominate or control. It is calm, grounded, and unwavering. It is the decision to honor one's own worth, even when it feels uncomfortable. A woman who respects herself understands that her time, energy, and emotional well-being are valuable. She no longer treats them as things to be freely taken by anyone who asks. Instead, she becomes intentional about where she invests herself. This is where boundaries begin to take shape. not as barriers to push people away, but as expressions of clarity and self-awareness. A boundary is simply a statement of truth. This is what I can give, and this is where I must stop. It is not an act of rejection toward others. It is an act of protection toward oneself. And yet, setting these boundaries can feel unfamiliar at first. There may be guilt, fear of disappointing others, or the worry of being misunderstood. But these feelings are not signs that she is doing something wrong. They are signs that she is doing something new. As she begins to practice, she learns that saying no does not make her unkind. It makes her honest. And honesty is a form of respect, both for herself and for others. When she says yes without the capacity or willingness to follow through wholeheartedly, it creates resentment within her and confusion around her. But when her yes is true and her no is clear, her relationships become more genuine and balanced. She also begins to notice how often she has allowed others to define her value. Perhaps she sought validation through approval, through being needed, through being everything for everyone. But self-respect invites her to step out of that cycle. It asks her to see herself not through the eyes of others, but through the truth of her own being. And in that truth, she realizes that she does not have to prove her worth. It is already there. There is a quiet strength that emerges when a woman stops over-explaining herself, when she no longer feels the need to justify every decision or seek permission to honor her own needs. She speaks with clarity, not to convince, but to express. And even if others do not fully understand, she remains steady. Because self-respect is not dependent on agreement. It is rooted in inner alignment. Over time, something beautiful begins to happen. The people around her adjust. Those who truly value her will begin to respect her boundaries, even if it takes time. Even if it takes time. And those who resist may slowly fade away. This is not a loss. It is a refinement. It creates space for relationships that are based on mutual respect rather than obligation or control. Her energy also begins to shift. When she is no longer drained by overextending herself, she has more to give where it truly matters. Her presence becomes more vibrant, her interactions more meaningful. She is no longer scattered or depleted because she is no longer giving from emptiness. She is giving from a place of fullness, and that changes everything. Self-respect also transforms the way she sees herself in quiet moments. There is a sense of dignity that grows within her, a knowing that she is no longer betraying her own needs for the sake of acceptance. This dignity is reflected in her posture, in her voice, in the way she carries herself. It is subtle but undeniable, and from this place her glow deepens. It is not the glow of perfection or approval, but the glow of integrity, the glow of a woman who stands firmly in her truth, who honors her boundaries without guilt, and who understands that protecting her peace is not selfish, it is essential. Because when a woman respects herself, she does not just change her own life, she changes the way the world responds to her. And more importantly, she changes the way she responds to herself. There is a profound shift that happens when a woman stops seeing her body as something to fix and begins to see it as something to honor. For so long, she may have been taught, directly or subtly, that her body is an object to be judged, compared, and perfected. She may have learned to focus on its flaws rather than its functions, to criticize rather than appreciate. But the moment she changes this perspective, the relationship she has with herself begins to transform in the most powerful way. To nurture the body as a sacred vessel is to recognize that it is not separate from her, it is the home through which she experiences life. Every breath she takes, every step she walks, every emotion she feels is carried through this body. And yet, how often has she ignored its needs, silenced its signals, or pushed it beyond its limits just to meet expectations or chase an image? When she begins to nurture her body with awareness, everything becomes more intentional. The way she eats is no longer driven by guilt or impulse, but by care. She chooses nourishment not as a punishment or reward, but as an act of love. She starts to listen, truly listen to what her body needs. Sometimes it asks for rest, sometimes for movement, sometimes for stillness. And instead of overriding these signals, she learns to respect them. Movement itself becomes a form of gratitude rather than obligation. It is no longer about forcing the body into a certain shape, but about celebrating what it can do. Whether it is a walk under the open sky, a stretch that releases tension, or any form of physical activity, she engages with her body in a way that feels supportive, not harsh. There is a softness in this approach, but also a quiet discipline because caring for the body consistently requires presence and commitment. Rest too becomes sacred. In a world that often glorifies constant productivity, she begins to understand that rest is not laziness, it is restoration. When she allows herself to pause without guilt, to sleep without feeling undeserving, she gives her body the space it needs to heal and renew. And this renewal is reflected not just in her physical energy, but in her emotional and mental clarity as well. As this relationship deepens, the inner dialogue she has with her body begins to change. The harsh criticism softens into understanding. The constant comparison fades into acceptance. She no longer stands in front of a mirror searching for imperfections. Instead, she sees a living, breathing part of herself that has carried her through every challenge, every joy, every moment of her life. And that realization brings a sense of gratitude that cannot be forced. It must be felt. This gratitude creates a different kind of glow. It is not about flawless skin or perfect features, but about vitality. There is a lightness in her movements, a calmness in her expression, a presence that feels alive. When a woman is connected to her body in this way, she carries herself differently. She is not hiding, not shrinking, not apologizing for her existence. She is at ease within herself. Nurturing the body also means protecting it from what drains or harms it. This includes not only physical habits, but also environments and influences. She becomes more aware of what she consumes, not just in terms of food, but in terms of energy. What she watches, what she listens to, the spaces she spends time in, all of these affect her. And as her awareness grows, she begins to choose what supports her well being rather than what diminishes it. Over time, this care becomes a quiet ritual woven into her daily life. It is not something she does occasionally. It becomes part of who she is. And through this consistency, she builds a foundation of strength, balance, and harmony. This is the essence of true nurturing, not role, not restriction, but respect. A deep, unwavering respect for the body as something sacred. And when a woman lives in this way, her glow is no longer something she seeks externally. It radiates naturally as a reflection of the love and care she has cultivated within herself. There is a silent conversation happening within a woman every moment of her life. It does not pause when she is surrounded by others, and it does not fade when the world becomes quiet. It is the voice that comments, interprets, questions, and sometimes criticizes. For many, this voice has become so familiar that it feels like truth. But there comes a moment of awakening when she begins to realize that not every thought she hears is a reflection of who she truly is. To choose thoughts that empower rather than diminish is not about denying reality or forcing positivity. It is about becoming aware of the power her thoughts carry and recognizing that what she repeatedly tells herself shapes how she feels, how she acts, and ultimately how she lives. A thought may seem small, fleeting, almost insignificant, but when repeated over time, it becomes a belief, and beliefs quietly build the foundation of her identity. At first, she may notice how often her mind drifts towards self criticism. It may compare her to others, remind her of past mistakes, or predict failure before she even begins. These thoughts may have been formed through past experiences, external influences, or moments when she felt unseen or unworthy. But awareness changes everything. The moment she observes these patterns without immediately accepting them, she creates space between herself and the thought. In that space, she gains a choice. Instead of allowing a negative thought to take root, she can gently question it. Is this true? Is this helping me grow? Would I speak this way to someone I love? These questions are not meant to create conflict within her, but clarity. Because often she will realize that the harsh voice within her is not wisdom, it is conditioning. And conditioning can be rewritten. Choosing empowering thoughts does not mean replacing every negative thought with an unrealistic affirmation. It means guiding the mind toward truth that is supportive and constructive. For example, instead of saying, I am not good enough, she may begin to say, I am learning, I am growing, and I am capable. This shift may seem subtle, but it carries a completely different energy. One closes her off, the other opens a path forward. Over time, this practice becomes more natural. She becomes more mindful of what she allows to linger in her mind. She understands that not every thought deserves her attention. Just as she would not welcome every stranger into her home, she learns not to welcome every thought into her inner space. Some thoughts can be acknowledged and gently released without attachment or judgment. As her inner dialogue becomes kinder and more intentional, her emotional world begins to change. She feels less weighed down by doubt and more supported from within. Challenges no longer feel like proof of her limitations, but opportunities for growth. She becomes more resilient, not because life becomes easier, but because her relationship with herself becomes stronger. There is also a deep sense of peace that comes from this practice. When her mind is not constantly filled with self criticism or fear, there is room for clarity. She can think more clearly, respond more calmly, and act more wisely. This clarity reflects outwardly in her presence. Her words carry more intention, her actions more confidence, and perhaps most importantly, she begins to trust herself. When her thoughts are aligned with encouragement rather than doubt, she feels safer with Tylee. In her own mind, she no longer feels like she is her own enemy. Instead, she becomes her own source of support, guidance, and strength. This inner shift creates a glow that is deeply felt. It is the glow of someone who is no longer torn apart by her own thoughts, but uplifted by them. Her energy feels lighter, her presence more open, her spirit more at ease. Because in the end, the way she speaks to herself becomes the way she experiences the world. And when her thoughts become a place of empowerment, her entire life begins to reflect that quiet, radiant strength. There is a deep transformation that begins when a woman chooses to live with purpose and authenticity, not the kind of purpose that is defined by titles, achievements, or the expectations of others, but a quieter, more profound sense of direction, one that comes from within. It is the understanding that her life is not meant to be a performance, but an expression of truth. For a long time, she may have adapted herself to fit into spaces that were never aligned with her. She may have said what was expected, acted how she was taught, and followed paths that seemed safe or approved. And in doing so, she may have slowly drifted away from her true self. This drift is often subtle. It does not happen all at once, but over time through small compromises and silent agreements to be less than who she truly is. But there comes a moment, sometimes through discomfort, sometimes through reflection, when she begins to feel that something is missing. Even if everything looks fine on the outside, there is an inner disconnect, and that feeling becomes an invitation to return to herself. Living with purpose begins with honesty. She starts asking herself questions she may have avoided before. What truly matters to me? What feels aligned with my values? Where am I pretending and why? These questions are not always easy because the answers may require change, but they are necessary because without truth, there can be no real alignment. As she becomes more honest with herself, she begins to make different choices. She starts to move away from what feels forced and toward what feels real. This does not mean her life suddenly becomes perfect or free of challenges. In fact, choosing authenticity can sometimes bring discomfort because it requires letting go of what is familiar but misaligned. It may mean disappointing others, stepping into the unknown, or standing alone in her truth. But within that discomfort, there is a deep sense of peace because she is no longer betraying herself. Purpose, in its truest form, is not always something grand or visible. It is found in how she lives each day. It is in the intention behind her actions, the integrity in her choices, and the integrity in her presence. When she aligns her life with her values, even the simplest moments become meaningful. She no longer feels like she is drifting through life. She feels grounded, directed, and connected. Authenticity also frees her from the exhausting need to compare. When she is rooted in who she truly is, she no longer feels threatened by the success or beauty of others. She understands that her path is unique and that trying to imitate someone else only takes her further away from her own truth. This realization brings a sense of liberation. She stops measuring her worth based on external standards and starts valuing herself based on inner alignment. Her voice begins to change as well. She speaks more openly, more honestly. Not to impress, but to express. There is a clarity in her words because they are no longer filtered through fear or the need for approval. And even when she is uncertain, she remains real. This honesty creates deeper, more meaningful connections with others. Beck. All people can feel when someone is genuine. There is also a quiet confidence that emerges from living this way. It is not loud or attention seeking. It does not need validation. It comes from knowing that she is living in alignment with her truth, and that knowing is enough. It steadies her even when external circumstances are unpredictable. This alignment between her inner world and her outer life creates a natural glow. It is the glow of someone who is no longer divided within herself. There is no mask to maintain, no role to perform. She is simply being, and in that being there is a sense of ease, a sense of wholeness. Because when a woman lives with purpose and authenticity, she is no longer searching for meaning, she is embodying it. And that embodiment radiates in a way that cannot be imitated or forced. It is real, it is grounded, and it is deeply, undeniably alive. There is a delicate balance that a woman must learn if she is to truly glow from within, the balance between giving love and keeping herself whole. Love by its nature is expansive. It reaches outward, it nurtures, it supports, it holds space for others. And many women are deeply connected to this energy. They give generously, they care deeply, and they often place the needs of others before their own. But when this giving is not rooted in awareness, it can slowly turn into self-neglect. At first, it may feel natural to always be there for others, to say yes, to offer more, to carry emotional weight that is not hers. She may feel needed, appreciated, even valued for her ability to give so much. But over time, something begins to shift. The energy she gives is not replenished. The space she holds for others is not held for her. And without realizing it, she begins to feel drained, unseen, and disconnected from herself. This is where awareness becomes essential. Giving love should not mean oceaning oneself. It should not require her to silence her needs, ignore her boundaries, or abandon her well-being. True love does not ask for self-erasure. Instead, it invites presence, honesty, and balance. When a woman begins to understand this, she starts to give differently. She no longer gives from obligation or fear of rejection. She gives because she chooses to, because her heart is open, not because she feels she must earn love or approval. This shift changes everything. Her giving becomes intentional, not automatic. It becomes conscious, not draining. She also begins to recognize the importance of receiving. For a long time, she may have felt uncomfortable being on the receiving end, whether it was help, care, or even simple kindness. But she starts to understand that receiving is not weakness. It is part of the natural flow of connection. When she allows herself to receive, she restores balance. She acknowledges that her needs are just as valid as anyone else's. Boundaries play a quiet but powerful role in this balance. They are not limitations on love, they are protectors of it. When she sets boundaries, she ensures that her giving does not come at the cost of her own peace. She learns to say no without guilt, to step back when needed, and to honor her limits without feeling selfish. And in doing so, she preserves the quality of her love. Because love that is given from exhaustion is not the same as love that is given from fullness. There is also a deep shift in how she defines her worth. She no longer measures it by how much she gives or how much she sacrifices. She understands that she is worthy simply because she exists, not because of what she provides for others. This realization frees her from the need to overextend herself just to feel valued. As she becomes more grounded in herself, her relationships begin to change. They become more balanced, more respectful, more genuine. She is no longer surrounded by connections that depend on her constant giving without reciprocation. Instead, she attracts relationships where there is mutual care, where her presence is appreciated, not taken for granted. Her energy begins to feel different, lighter, calmer, more centered. She is still loving, still kind, still giving, but there is a new strength within her. She is no longer losing herself in the process. She remains rooted even as she reaches outward. And this is where her glow deepens. It is not just the glow of kindness, but the glow of wholeness. The glow of a woman who knows how to love without abandoning herself. There is a quiet power in this balance, a sense of harmony that radiates through her presence. Because when a woman learns to give love while staying connected to herself, she no longer feels depleted by the world, she feels aligned within it. And from that alignment, her light shines in a way that is both nurturing and unshakably strong.